Good morning, friends and enemies. Today, we are here to wrap up players that I would not touch with a 10-foot pole in 2025 fantasy football. We did this for running backs. We did this for wide receivers. Today, we will be wrapping it up with 6 players divided between tight ends and quarterbacks. I believe we have 3 apiece for y'all. All right. These are dudes that under no circumstances, under their current price, near their current price, am I drafting them onto my fantasy team. If you want to see those other positions, we will link those in the show notes. Highly suggest you go watch those after you tune in to this bad boy. To start this list, we're going to go in reverse order and actually start with the tight ends. All right. And the guy getting drafted the highest on this list is the tight end 6 right now. A guy that's been near and dear to fantasy players' hearts for the last decade. Travis Kelce. This is something that I tweeted out a few days ago. Make sure you're following me on Twitter if you want more stats and stuff like this. But I was kind of just comping him to David Njoku. But the overall gist of it is just how mispriced Kelce is himself in drafts right now. The tight end 6, his Vegas line per BetMGM right now, 675 yards, 4.5 touchdowns. When I look at what Kelce did on paper last year, it's easy to see the box score and be like, okay, it was a semi-down year for Travis Kelce, but he still kind of got there at the end. And he's still tied to Patrick Mahomes, and he's still tied to the Kansas City Chiefs. So, like, you could do worse than Travis Kelce as the tight end 6, 7, or 8. I'm here to tell you that it's going to be hard to do worse than Travis Kelce as a top 10 tight end this year. And the most obvious factor here, outside of the age, right? He turns 36 years old soon, but the target competition, you could not have had a better run out for Travis Kelce for fantasy purposes than he did last year. Even dating back to 2023, this was a reason I was all over Rashee Rice in my videos last year, and a lot of you guys drafted him. Unfortunately, ultimately got disappointed, but that shit was a movie for 3 weeks. The second half of all of 2023, Travis Kelce was still considered elite, but Rashee Rice actually outproduced him. He had that second half of the year rookie bump. Rashee Rice outproduced Travis Kelce while Travis Kelce was still producing at a very high rate, which gave us the indicator that Rashee Rice was going to be a real player in this offense. So we were very high on Rashee Rice coming into this year, and Rashee Rice, weeks 1, 2, 3 was a monster, obviously, like top 2, 3 fantasy point per game type wide receiver, and then he gets hurt. In those 3 games that those two started together, Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce, let me remind you how slow of a start Travis Kelce was off to. 3 full games, 8 total catches, 69 total yards, 0 total touchdowns. That was what he did when Rashee Rice was on the field. Kelce then had to move into a more prolific role, and he averaged 8.5 yards per reception. His targets were fine. 8.5 yards per reception was a career low by a wide margin because it was just get the ball in Kelce's hands near the line of scrimmage because we can't do anything else on offense. His reception numbers were completely injury inflated. Like, not only did their number 1 target, Rashee Rice, go down, he also had a full half of a year where Xavier Worthy was just a rookie acclimating to the offense. You had Hollywood Brown, who's supposed to be a guy in this offense, got hurt right away and missed the majority of the season. You had Isaiah Pacheco, who the run game was supposed to move through, got hurt right away and missed, 8-10 weeks for a broken leg. Kelce was force-fed targets last year. He ranked 21st in yards per out run among tight ends, 33rd in yards per target, 34th in yards per reception, 26th in true catch rate. And let me tell you, like last year, if you were going to be an injury merchant, he did what he could to really produce. He squeezed every ounce of juice he could have had. This dude had the single most red zone targets last year among tight ends with 26 of them. And if you owned him, you knew he never scored touchdowns. The guy had 26 red zone targets, ended up with 3 touchdowns on the year. With Rashee Rice back and supposedly fully healthy, with Xavier Worthy now off of his breakout, with Hollywood Brown re-signed, with Pacheco back healthy again, like, this is one of the most mispriced ADPs I've seen in fantasy football this year. Now, something I want to do at the end of every one of my player take is give you a contrary take on why or how this take could age poorly. The only way I see this take aging poorly, outside of injuries, like I don't want to go down that path with every player because that's very, very obvious, but it's Mahomes getting back to his 40-plus touchdown self, which I don't think is out of the range of outcomes, but I think a lot of it's going to be inflated because he has a lot of good players around him to throw the ball to outside of Kelce. But if he does that and Kelce has a Mark Andrews-esque year, basically what Mark Andrews did last year, where you had a lot of touchdown deodorant kind of disguising who he really was as a player, that's where Kelce can be okay and return value. I could see a world where Kelce catches 50, 55 balls, 550 to 650 yards. But if he breaks right and things go lucky in the touchdown department, maybe he scores 8 or 9 touchdowns. And at the end of the day, if you're a fantasy tight end and you kind of back your way into those numbers, 8 or 9 touchdowns, you're going to be the tight end, 7, 8, or 9 and finish there. But that's the only way I see it happening. I just see his efficiency. I see his actual role in this offense completely depleting. And unless they need to rely on him, I think we saw last year, like they didn't want to rely on him in the passing game because they wanted to save him for the playoffs. He had the one big playoff game and then completely flopped after that, but they were forced to put him into the passing game because of all the injuries to the weapons. This year, if people can stay healthy, like I would like to assume they're going to have more injury luck on the offensive side of the ball. If they stay healthy, they're not going to need to use Travis Kelce in the passing game as a focal point, which is what he had been and why he was such a prolific fantasy tight end producer for such a long time. So Travis Kelce within the top 6 tight ends is one of the worst picks you can make in fantasy football this year. And before we get into that, I just want to let you guys know that we do produce a product every summer, our draft guide, which will be available for pre-order within like a week or so. If you are interested in getting that at a very, very discounted price, it'll have all of our rankings, it'll have all of our fades, it'll have all of our must draft players and everything that you need for your draft. When you're on the clock 2 minutes, let us do the heavy lifting for you. We're going to drop a link where you could just throw your email in there, and as soon as the pre-order pricing and the very, very discounted pricing for that product goes live, we'll shoot you over an email and you'll be notified. So obviously free to sign up, free to join that, free to put your email in that link right there, and we do that work for you as well. So moving on to tight end number 2 is someone that I think is a good candidate to replace Travis Kelce over the next 10 years. That is Tyler Warren, the 14th overall pick in the NFL draft this previous April, goes to the Indianapolis Colts. Love his long-term outlook. Love him as a player. I think he's one of the more talented tight end prospects we've seen over the last half decade. However, his redraft situation could not be uglier than it is in Indianapolis. He is currently on Underdog being taken above David Njoku and Tucker Kraft, above his counterpart, Colston Loveland. He's the tight end 10 right now. And that's far above guys who are probably projected similar outputs like Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth. This is also one of the more insane ADPs, in my opinion, right now for redraft purposes. We have an inaccurate quarterback no matter which way you look at it, right? Like we like Josh Downs. I think he's a really good player. I think Michael Pittman will have a bounce back from an efficiency standpoint, being healthy. I think he's just a good receiver in isolation. I like Adonai Mitchell. I think he's an incredible route runner. I think Alec Pierce has a place in this offense as a downfield threat. But at the same time, this is an offense that's likely projected to throw for 3,000 passing yards, if that, and probably sub 20 passing touchdowns. How many guys can really have prolific fantasy numbers at that type of clip? And if there's one position where we've seen guys not be able to get there as a rookie in a low volume passing offense, it is the tight end position. Like, sure, we could talk about Sam Laporta and how he broke out 2 years ago as a rookie. Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers was basically the only target there last year. You look at Sam Laporta, you're in the Detroit offense where you're throwing for 35, 40 passing touchdowns, 4,500 passing yards. You have an insane mind like Ben Johnson. So whatever, you guys can make the arguments whether or not you like rookie tight ends and how much that has changed over the last couple of years. For me, this is a crowded receiver room with what's going to be an inaccurate quarterback no matter who wins the job. We also have one thing that I think is just completely overlooked, and I've talked about this a few times in recent videos. The offense is not necessarily pass first or pass heavy when Anthony Richardson is not under center. It's run heavy when Jonathan Taylor is healthy. So regardless of who's been at quarterback over the last few years, whether it's Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew, the pass and run splits are completely indicated by whether or not Jonathan Taylor is also on the field. Like even when Joe Flacco was playing, his pass attempt numbers when he was throwing, 37, 40, 42 times per game were down to 27, 26, 25 times per game when Jonathan Taylor was under center. So again, very run heavy offense, crowded, talented receiver room. I just don't see the real statistical upside for a dude like Tyler Warren this year. Where I think this take can go bad is if Daniel Jones just far out surprises most people, right? Like he's played poorly for the Giants over the last few years. I will say another concern I have is their offensive line. Ryan Kelly and Will Fries both move over to Minnesota. Could need more tight end blocking, just could be more pressure under the quarterback. So I could see Daniel Jones struggling again. But regardless, how this take can age poorly, Daniel Jones plays really, really well. Tyler Warren becomes the screen option at the line of scrimmage and kind of scams his way to a lot of PPR value. The other way I could see it going kind of sideways as well is them using him at the goal line like a quarterback or in wildcat packages like he did in college. Often that's a little bit less likely just because we already have two mobile quarterbacks in Daniel Jones and or Anthony Richardson and then Jonathan Taylor. So it's like even if Tyler Warren were to be using those packages, he is still like the third rushing option when it comes to those guys. So if he ends up being like a PPR guy on the goal line, if he ends up or a screen guy on the goal line, if he ends up being in a wildcat package on the goal line, like there's a world where he kind of lucks his way into Travis Kelce-esque numbers, what I was saying, where he has 7 or 8 touchdowns at the end of the year. Maybe 5 of them are passing touchdown, 2 or 3 of them are rushing touchdowns, which I feel like is a pretty damn big reach. I just don't see a world where Tyler Warren really gets there statistically in redraft this this year. So Tyler Warren's tight end number 2. And the last tight end on this list should come as no surprise, but it is Mr. Kyle Pitts. You could not pay me. You could not sit me in a torture room for 3 days where the smartest people on planet Earth, the most renowned scientists and analytical people, the best data analysts in the world from the absolute most profitable banks on planet Earth can spew the most positive recognitions of Kyle Pitts and why he should break out this year. None of that would affect any sort of ownership percentage of Kyle Pitts on any single fantasy team that I have this year. None of that was scripted. That was just a flow of free consciousness of how I genuinely feel about Kyle Pitts as a player. He's a cone. He is a fucking cone. If he goes elsewhere and has a good career, cool. But I have seen him play enough as a Falcons fan. He doesn't actually add anything to this offense. He makes an explosive play every once in a while when there's literally nobody in his way when he could run the ball, but he's not shifty after the catch. He doesn't actually run good routes. He just sits in traffic and he's like the fourth option in the passing game. At the end of the day, this is what happened. His rookie year, he went for 1,000 yards. He had 3 huge games as a rookie where 40% of his yards were accumulated against the 3 bottom passing defenses in the entire NFL. So those stats lived on for the last 5 years. The last time, hear me out here. Hear me out. The last time Kyle Pitts had 95 plus receiving yards in a game was December 26th, not of 2024, not of 2023, not of 2022. December 26th of 2021 was the last time Kyle Pitts had 95 receiving yards in a game. The way that this take can age poorly is not possible. So don't draft Kyle Pitts anywhere, at any time. Now that y'all have got me pissed off, let's move to the quarterbacks, all right? First guy on this list is Tua Tagovailoa. I still not sure if I pronounce his name correctly. Now, I know I made a video last week where I was showing you my ownership percentage on Underdog Fantasy, and Tua was one of my most owned quarterbacks, which kind of blew my mind. That was very early on drafting in the offseason where I thought like Tyreek Hill was, looking okay and whatever. Anyways, we have switched our mindset. I'm not touching Tua Tagovailoa as a top 18, top 19, top 20 quarterback this year in fantasy football. And I get it. Like everyone's going to say, oh, at the end of the year, he'll have 4,200 passing yards and, 27 passing touchdowns. I don't believe that for a second, and I'll try to lay out in the most like commonsensical argument as to why. I don't want to get too far into numbers because I do think most numbers, when you just look at them average over the last couple of years, Tua does get there. But I want to preach to you why I don't think it makes sense that he will get there this year, and it'll be more of like a medium floor, very low upside type of quarterback. And medium floor, I mean like 3,600 passing yards, doesn't get it done for fantasy. When we look at the overall makeup of the Miami Dolphins heading into the year 2025. The cons here, they have an awful offensive line. They lost their 2 best offensive linemen 2 years ago in free agency, and this was something I was saying last year as to why I was like, maybe hold up on Devon Achane because I could see the rushing efficiency going down, which was correct, but he ended up getting so involved in the passing game that it didn't matter. Their offensive line not getting any better. Teron Armstead, the 5-time Pro Bowl tackle that they had anchoring their line, has now retired. This is going to be one of the worst offensive lines in football. Tyreek Hill, he looks like he's falling off a cliff, whether that's on the football field or off the football field. Your opinion on that? Sure. Talk about whatever you want, but the vibes around Tyreek Hill are abysmal. You have the concussion concerns, which honestly I'm less concerned about than most people out there. Every conversation about like every player is like he gets one more concussion and he's done for his career, and then that player gets concussion and they just come back. Like most players are not losing, they're not quitting their career after concussion. So I'm actually less concerned about that, though there are probably longer time frames in between concussions that he can come back from. So you have concussion concerns. He also just does not play well versus quality teams. That's been proven out over and over again. He struggles versus the Bills. He struggles versus any high quality defense for the most part. And more importantly, he always struggles in December when the temperatures are cold and when things matter and you're playing against tough teams and teams have a lot of tape on you from that year. When fantasy games matter, Tua does not show up. And my highest level of concern here, all those things kind of mixed in, is they cannot utilize their best weapons, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, down the field like they did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Tua was really blowing up statistically for the first time and Mike McDaniel came in as the prodigy. Teams, all they do now is play cover 2, cover 3, cover 4 against these defenses, so you cannot take the top off of it. And it led to Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane catching a million balls. Like, that is not an opinion. That is how the NFL works now, and it's what you're seeing from Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs as well. It's like they don't allow you to take the top off, so that passing offense, now the entire like narrative around Patrick Mahomes is, he's not that good of a downfield thrower anymore. He doesn't take shots downfield or whatever. They can't move the offense downfield. It's because the teams play cover 2 at a crazy high rate, and it takes away the effectiveness of guys like Tyreek Hill. And this is just a very, very obvious stat to kind of promote what I'm saying. Tua's ADOT by year. ADOT is average depth of target to any pass catcher. 2022, 10.1. The very next year, 2023, 8.2. Last year, 2024, 6.1. And there was a clip that went like kind of viral a couple of weeks ago with Tyreek Hill at, I think it was at the Fanatics Fest or something. He says the Bills only play zone because they're a bunch of bitches. It's like, no, they play zone because it fucking works. Like they know as receivers, he's like, they play zone, they play cover 4, so I can't beat them deep. It's like, yeah, because that shit works against you. It's why the Bills have so much success against you. It's why these other teams watch that tape, play that, and now you can't produce anymore. And now that takes the top off. That takes the special spices away from Mike McDaniel's offense, man. Tua, I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's an inaccurate quarterback. I think he's well-timed within the offense. I just think his upside is severely capped based on offensive line play and based off the way that defenses play this offense now. So the way that I think this take could age poorly, I just don't see defenses switching that type of coverage because it just would make no sense too. Obviously, Tua goes concussion-less throughout the year, but more so it's going to be on Mike McDaniel to completely reinvent this offense. That is where I see this take aging poorly. If Mike McDaniel is able to like completely re-scheme this offense to beat these deep zones, that could happen, which I don't actually think is really crazy given how like revolutionary he kind of was when he came in as a head coach. Just the amount of pre-snap motion and the amount of play action and like the amount of stuff that was kind of new or just the younger coaches were utilizing. Mike McDaniel reinventing this. Crazier things have happened, but that is kind of the only way I see them being able to utilize those like deep passes. Quarterback number 2, and you know, concern is kind of the same here for Kyler Murray out in Arizona. He's just not really for me. He's the quarterback 9 right now in fantasy drafts. And if you drafted him last year and if you had him on your team, you know damn well he was not worth that price. And yes, I get it. He finished as the quarterback 10 last year, which he does typically end up doing. Like when you get a full season out of Kyler Murray, he'll finish between, you know, quarterback 9, 10, 11, whatever. He gets there by the end of the year. And sometimes he even has like very, very high upside years. But I also think when you just look at end of season final rankings, like you're discounting a lot of things that could happen on top of that way too heavily. Last year, we had absolute dud years from CJ Stroud. Trevor Lawrence hurt. Dak Prescott hurt. Patrick Mahomes dud year again. Brock Purdy, all of his offensive players got injured. Justin Fields is now the starting quarterback somewhere. We have a crazy influx of really, really talented sophomore quarterbacks coming in from last year's rookie quarterbacks, these young guys that can certainly be as good, if not jump Kyler Murray in rankings. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bryce Young. Like, are they as athletic and offer you the type of explosion that he does? Maybe not, but any of those guys that I've named, 5 of them could easily jump Kyler Murray, and we could see Kyler Murray finish as the quarterback 14 this year. So I really, really dislike the argument of like, oh, Kyler Murray deserves that draft price because he typically finishes as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. You're not taking into account who can now finish above him. And it's kind of unfortunate because I don't know how long y'all have been following me, but like Kyler was one of my favorite players. I remember watching him in high school, going back to his days in Texas, one of the most explosive high school athletes like of all time. In college, I remember I pinpointed him as a possible Heisman winner like the first week of September, and his odds were like 35-1. And I remember a lot of people tailed that and hit me up after his Heisman campaign. Like I was infatuated with Kyler's talent, and I still think he's good. I just don't think he'll be that level of QB at the NFL level. I think a lot of it is like when he gets down to the red zone, he really does have trouble seeing over his linemen, and it leads to a big dip in touchdown production from guys like Trey McBride. Last year, he played his first full season since 2020, but realistically, my biggest issue with Kyler, all those things aside, are similar to my concerns with Tua, and that the scheme of the offense is kind of disallowing him from becoming what I think he could be. And I don't think last year was like abysmal, but if you watched Arizona last year at all, or if you own players on that team outside of Trey McBride, or anything in the passing offense, I should say, outside of Trey McBride, they just never clicked. They never clicked. It felt so dysfunctional. It was so up and down from week to week. Drew Petzing was the OC, and he's coming back for year 2. I just don't know what changes in year 2. I don't know that we saw enough signs, I should say. I don't know if we saw enough signs second half of last year to make me feel like they're going to, again, revolutionize their offense or really, really put in the work to make sure that Marvin Harrison is playing the right role for what he should be playing. So I could really see a season very similar to last year. So, you know, by that logic, he finished as the quarterback 10 last year. People that had him will tell you that his quarterback 10 finish was not worth a quarterback 9 price to draft this year. So take that as you want. I think there's a really good chance we see extremely similar numbers this year than we did last year. And for me, I'm not paying quarterback 9 price for that. So how I think this take ages poorly is, I think 2 things. Like if James Conner, you know, I said I didn't want to go into the injury conversation, but I think James Conner is definitely an injury candidate. He's someone that gets hurt all the time. But if he has a significant injury this year, usually misses, 2 to 4 games. But if he has a significant injury this year, you could see Kyler get a lot more pass heavy on the goal line, but more involved in the run game as well on the goal line. So if that happens and he ends up rushing for like 8-9 touchdowns, could be a monster year, obviously. 2 is the Drew Petzing thing. Like, if he gets very inventive, if he gets very creative with this offense, they learn how to better utilize Marvin Harrison Jr. If they can get MHJ to that like 12 to 1,400 receiving yardage mark, and Trey McBride will just be what Trey McBride is, a 1,000-yard tight end, Kyler will probably have his very first 4,000-yard passing season. I'm, again, just not sure that I'm confident enough to be like, I'm going to bank on that as a QB1 price, based on what we didn't see last year from Drew Petzing. So I am likely out on Kyler Murray at this price. If he moves back, to quarterback 12 to 15 in that range, if he's starting to go around where like Justin Fields is, I'll feel better about his pricing. Last guy, and someone that I'm probably, not in on regardless of his pricing, and ADP realistically, most people are not in on, but I don't know, maybe you're a casual fantasy player and you owned him last year and you're like, oh, he got a starting quarterback job and, they got some good weapons out there now, whatever. It's Sam Darnold out in Seattle. This, again, feels rather obvious. He gets a 3-year, $100 million deal from Seattle. Seattle does get rid of DK Metcalf. They get rid of Tyler Lockett. They replace them with Cooper Kupp, who I am so far removed from having interest in this year. I don't think I really need to convince anyone that Sam Darnold was a full Kevin O'Connell merchant last year. He was a full KLC merchant. And while Sam definitely has some arm talent, he is not what his stats were last year. 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns. Like, Kevin O'Connell does that. He puts up those numbers with like any quarterback who steps in that system. And one of my biggest worries, which I think is pretty obvious, is the offensive line in Seattle. They've been really poor. And I think Sam Darnold plays very poorly behind poor offensive linemen. They were ranked 26th last year per PFF in pass blocking. Now, they did use their first-round pick on Gray Zabel, played at North Dakota State. Very good athlete, can really play anywhere on the offensive line. Should be a great add for them, but it's still ultimately going to be a below average, if not a bad offensive line. And we just know that historically, Sam Darnold struggles when under pressure. The other thing I will say is, like, Sam Darnold, a lot of his stats and a lot of his ceiling games or overall ceiling season came to fruition because his deep ball was working last year, man. You could have fooled me into thinking he was the best deep ball passer in the NFL, and I think he's got the arm for it. My problem is I just don't think they got the personnel in Seattle to utilize it. Like, JSN has been a pure slot wide receiver. Cooper Kupp, obviously a pure slot wide receiver. If you tried to put him on the outside, he might get, thrown outside of the hashes by every D-back working in the NFC West at this point. JSN, again, cool separator, like good against zone, good against man. He's not a guy that's going to torch you deep. He's not Jordan Addison. He's not Justin Jefferson. Like, I don't think he's going to be connecting on a lot of deep passes this year, despite Clint Kubiak coming over. But like, yeah, I'm completely out on Sam Darnold and the way that this passing offense is going to work. How I think this take ages poorly is everything that I hold true and everything that I believe just goes sideways. Like, Cooper Kupp is still good, which I don't agree with. Gray Zabel single-handedly turns this offensive line around, which we've seen crazier things. Offensive line get one or two really crucial pieces to it, and then they go from a bad to a pretty good offensive line kind of over the course of one summer. So I don't think that's crazy. Clint Kubiak's play-action heavy scheme masks Darnold's deficiencies, and Seattle just really underperforms in terms of expectations. Like, 8.5 wins is where they're at for Vegas. So if they, win 6 games and they're trailing most of the year, then he could throw the ball way more than expected. But I do think most of those things have to come to fruition for Sam Darnold to be even usable in Superflex lineups this year. So those are the 6 players that I am not touching with a 10-foot pole based on their pricing right now in fantasy drafts. All right. We've got Travis Kelce. We've got Tyler Warren, Kyle Pitts, Tua, Kyler Murray, and Sam Darnold. We did running backs. We did wide receivers. Those will be linked down below. But the very first link you will find down there is to sign up to the email list that will notify you for very, very, very heavily discounted pre-order BDGE draft guide pricing. Okay. Relatively cheap product if you want help with your drafts, if you haven't really been paying attention, or just want the best tool that will help you when you are on the clock. The draft guide will do that just for you. All right. Sign up for the email list down below. While you're down there, hit the button that looks like this. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and go watch some other movies on the channel. All right. I'm out of here. Love you. Smoochies.